Okay, class, we're about to cover section R3.8, solving quadratic equations with the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula here is provided for you. And we also have the quadratic equation in standard form. We have our A, B, and C that we will substitute into this formula. Okay, so now we are going to substitute this value in. So we have this set up in standard form. So we have A, which is 1, B is 3, and C is -10. Now we want to use the quadratic formula here. So now we will have X is equal to negative, and we know B is 3, so it'll be the opposite of B, plus or minus the square root of B, which is 3, and that's squared, minus 4, times A is 1, and C is -10. And this is all over 2 times 1. Now, one thing, I'm going to say this just this one time, that when you actually do this problem here, make sure that you have your division bar covering everything. This 2 times A divides everything. So now we will have X is equal to -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9. -4 times 1 is -4 times -10 is positive 40. And that's divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Now we will have -3 plus or minus the square root of 49 all over 2. Now, -3 plus or minus square root of 49 is 7 all over 2. Now this, we have to break this up into 2 separate answers because we have plus or minus. So it'll be X is equal to -3 plus 7 over 2. And then also X is equal to -3 minus 7 over 2. So this will give us X is equal to, this will give us 4 over 2, which is 2. So X is 2. And this will give us a -10 over 2, which will make it -5. So our answer is X is 2, comma, -5. So these are the 2 answers for X. Now remember, because you have this on video, you can pause it and go back to write down all of these exercises here. Okay, now we go here to factoring. But first, let me let a few more people copy this down real quick. Okay, now we go here to factoring. We're going to take the same exact problem and factor it. Now, by now, we already know the A, B, and C. Well, I'll write it again. A is 1, B is 3, and C is -10. So we multiply our A and C. A times C will give us -10. We'll do the factors of -10. We know we will have 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Because B is positive, that means the larger numbers are positive and the smaller numbers are negative. Now when we add these values here, we will have 9, and then this would be 3. Since -2 and 5 gives us 3, that's what we would substitute in for 3x. So we have x squared minus 2x plus 5x minus 10 equals 0. We group the first 2 values, we can factor out x, and we'll have x minus 2. We group the second 2 values, we can factor out a positive 5, and we'll have x minus 2, and it equals 0. So now, we will have x minus 2 in one parenthesis, x plus 5 in another parenthesis, and that equals 0. So we'll set both of these individually equal to 0. So we will add 2 on both sides, and x is 2. We'll subtract 5 on both sides, and x is -5. Now if you notice here, we have the exact same answer we had down here. So x is 2 and also negative 5. So using either method will give you the same answer. Now, it says for both factoring and the quadratic formula, you must set the equation equal to 0. And then it says always try factoring first, unless instructed otherwise, because it is often easier. Okay, now one other thing, going back up here to these answers, you should actually put or. So x is 2 or negative 5. So x is 2 or negative 5. Okay, now we go to the next page. Example 2. It says solve using the quadratic formula. Simplify it completely. Now the first thing you have to know with the quadratic formula is you must have the equation equal 0. So we're going to subtract 7 on both sides first. Okay, now we list our A, B, and C. A is 3, B is negative 5, and C is negative 7. So now we have our formula. It's the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of 4 times A times C. Oh, actually, no, I forgot the B squared. I was supposed to do the B squared first. So we would do actually the negative 5. We'll do negative 5 in parentheses squared minus 4 times A, which is 3, times C, which is negative 7, all over 2 times A, which is 3. So we have x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of, this would be 25. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12 times a negative 7, so that would be a positive 84. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. So this will give us x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 109 all over 6. And this is the final answer because there's nothing more we could do with that. Now if you look here at B, we must get all the values over to one side. And it also has to equal 0. And one other thing, your x squared coefficient cannot be negative. So we're going to subtract 4x and 2 on both sides. So we will have 5x squared minus 4x minus 2 is equal to 0. So we have A is 5, B is negative 4, and C is negative 2. So now we will have x is equal to the opposite of negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which would be negative 4 squared, minus 4 times A is 5, and C is negative 2. All over 2 times 5. So we will have x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of, this would be 16. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20, times a negative 2 is a positive 40. All over 10. So now, this will give us 4 plus or minus the square root of 56, all over 10. Now the square root of 56 does have a perfect square in it. It has a perfect square of 4. So it'd be x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 14 all over 10. So this would be 4 plus or minus 2 square root 14 all over 10. Now, one thing that we need to realize here is this. We need to realize that 4 and 2 both has 2 in common. So we can factor out a 2 here. So this would give us 2, and this would be 2 plus or minus the square root of 14 all over 10. Now 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 10 5 times. So our final answer here would be x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 14 all over 5. Now, we come here to C. C is basically the same as B. We're going to have to add 3x on both sides and subtract 5. But we're going to put this in order. It'll be 4x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Now, we will put our A, B, and C. A is 4, B is 3, and C is negative 5. So we would do our equation here. We have x is equal to the opposite of 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4. A is 4 and C is negative 5. And this is all over 2 times 4. So this would be negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. Times the negative 5 is positive 80. All over 8. So we have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 89 all over 8. And that is it for that problem. Now we come to the next page. Okay, now up here it says factoring. Okay, they're telling us when it works best. It says here, try if A is equal to 1, and then the square root, if we have parentheses squared, is equal to a number, or x squared is equal to a number. And then the quadratic formula, we could do that for all quadratics. You could use that for whenever. Okay, so now we come here to A. We have x squared is equal to a negative 6x minus 9. We will add 6x and 9 on both sides. Because remember, we want to set this equal to 0. Okay, now, this right here, I think factoring would be easier. This factors out to x plus 3 and x plus 3. Now, if you need to list the A, B, and C, that's fine. But since we had x plus 3 here twice, we just set one of these equal to 0, and that would be your answer. So x is negative 3. Now we go here to the next problem. We add 1 on both sides. We add 3 times x minus 5 in parentheses squared equals 7. Now we can divide each side by 3. And x minus 5 in parentheses squared is equal to 7/3. Now we need to take the square root of both sides. That's a double equal sign. Okay, so we'll take the square root of both sides. And then we would end up with x minus 5 equals. Now, since we're dealing with the complex number system, this side will be positive or negative square root of 7/3. Does everyone follow that? Okay, next, we will add 5 to both sides. And we have x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 7/3. Now we know we cannot leave this square root of 3 down here. So we have to go on. It'll be x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 7 over square root of 3. We multiply the numerator and denominator by the square root of 3. And our final answer would be